Hi folks, and it's a Sunday video, so I'm going to be answering, or attempting to answer some questions. And as you've probably seen from the title of this video, this is going to be answering some questions about summit camp, or summit camps, should I say. And when I go away camping, it is usually, as you probably know if you follow the channel, it is usually summit camps I do, as opposed to just sort of general wild camping. So I thought I'd share some of my tips that and maybe pre-camp and pre-trip tips, because that's what I was asked about on social. David M, what prep do you do for your summit camps? So that's what I'm going to talk about. I might look, yeah, I'm feeling a bit tired this morning. It's Saturday morning, it's about 9 o'clock, and I'm actually just back, not from a summit camp, but I nipped up to see two fellow YouTubers who were doing a summit camp this morning. They were camping on a fairly local hill to where I stay, and I popped up to see them. So I can blame Ray from the Renegade Scott channel and Robin from Walks with Wallace YouTube channel, because they were doing a summit camp last night for the summer solstice on a nearby hill. So I popped up to see them. So I was up at 4 this morning, and yeah, I should also apologise because Robin was up, but Ray was still asleep. So I do apologise, Ray. I didn't mean to wake you up. I think it was about 6 o'clock by the time I got to the summit. Anyway, I really look forward to you guys' videos. I'll put a link to them if you're interested. I'm sure they'll be out by the time this video is edited and ready to go. So, what tips can I give you on prep before I go wild camping? So I've written some stuff down here, so please excuse me while I look at my notes. My memory is not that great. I'm getting old. I don't tend to remember these things unless I write them down, especially when I'm doing a vlog. So the first thing that I can suggest that you do, and it's always something that I think about, is why. I always question, why am I going on a summit camp? Is it due to photography, or just to get away from civilization, or experience a sunrise or a sunset? Look, there's some of the things that I think about that before I go away, and the reason that I'm saying questioning why, that'll be related to the next few tips on, you know, where you go, location, and prep before you go. So you just ask yourself why you're going to do it. Usually, for me anyway, it's a combination of those things: getting away, bit of exercise, bit of fresh air, away from the world as we know it, the rat race and what have you. So following on from that tip, so the second bit of prep, or the second tip that I can give you, is figuring out, once you've figured out the reason why you're going, is figuring out which summit you're going to go to, and recce how far it is to the summit. Because when you go camping, things are different. You know, it's different to just going on a day trip. You've got a lot more in your pack and what have you. So the things I've written down here: look at the distance, look at the ascent, look and see if there's any scrambly sections, because something which might be a simple scramble when you've got a light backpack on can become quite a serious proposition when you're carrying all your gear. One example that I can give you is when I was up Ben Alligin. You might have seen my video when I got lucky enough to see the Northern Lights from a summit camp in Torridon. I was coming off the first peak, and I had my big backpack on, plus my drone backpack, because it was back in the days when the drones were still quite big. And I was just lowering myself down this sort of easy scrambly section, but it was quite exposed. And I'd forgotten how much how much my backpacks were extending from my back. It was about a good metre. That wasn't a metre, but it was a good bit, and it nearly pushed me off the side of the cliff. So that's the reason you need to look at these things. The other thing I've put down is check and see if there's any river crossings. And what I usually do for those sort of things is I go into the internet. And in Scotland, I think the best website is something called Walk Highlands, and it gives you route descriptions, maps to pore over, but also, more importantly, user reports. So you can go and look at numerous reports of people that have already been there, and routes up, and any scrambly bits that there may be. So that's a tip. That was tip 2. Tip 3, I think, is probably one of the most important ones. Is the summit that you have decided that you want to go to, is it suitable for camping? And what I mean by that is there enough sort of flat areas? Is the terrain going to be okay for you putting your tent down? And I'm not talking about flat billiard grassy spots, because believe me, I've talked about this before, believe me, it's very hard to find a very, very flat area of grass without any tufts of grass or rocks or bogs that you can sleep in. That's why you need a good ground mat. Check out my other video about ground mats if you're interested. So yeah, is it suitable? And the way that I do that is, once again, I use the internet and I go and do some research. Well, actually, I've actually written down one thing that I do before then, is probably the best piece of advice to find out if it's suitable for a camp is, have you been there before? Maybe go, do a trip to that summit, take mental notes. Every time I go out for hikes and what have you, I'm always sort of looking for spots which might be suitable for wild camps. Should I go back there and do a camp and what have you? So a good example of that was last year when I spent a couple of nights on Ben Van with Tom, and I'd actually been up, just about 2 or 3 weeks prior to that. At that point, I didn't know we were going to go wild camping, but I'd gone up Ben Van in Applecross, and I'd found this beautiful beach on the walk in. I thought, God, that would be perfect for a wild camp. I mean, I was on the summit of Ben Van. I noticed it was quite round and flat and lots of grass areas to camp. So I'd made a mental note that I wanted to go back there. And when me and Tom hooked up, I suggested that we headed up to that mountain. That was a fantastic wild camp, and it really was special. But you often don't have that. I sometimes go to summits that I've not been to for years, and I go, God, I can't remember what's it like up there. So a few of the things that I do is I go into the internet, Google wild camp on Summit A, whatever it is, Joe Bloggs Summit, and if anything comes up, then I look at that and I try and gather information of what people have done previously. However, that you'd be surprised at how few hits you get, unless you're doing the sort of really, really common hills like Benicrolace, the ones that everyone knows about. If it's less known ones for wild camping, there's surprisingly little out there. So then, if I can't find anything, just doing a Google search, I'll look at Flickr, because a lot of people will take summit shots when they're up there, and you can look at the summit shots and just see if there's any pictures of the ground in those shots that you can see, oh, that looks like it's flat enough to camp. It's not ideal, but it still works. And things like YouTube as well, that can be obviously quite good to do. So that's tip 3. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh yeah, tip 4, check the weather. I mean, if you're going out wild camping, and you're in the valleys and in the glens and lower down, you can usually find shelter in trees or behind dikes and walls and what have you. But when you're specifically wanting to summit camp, it's a different story, especially in the winter. I tend to now, springtime's my favourite time. Spring through to October. If the weather's really nice in the winter, I will go out. But it can be nice down in the glen. You've heard me saying this again. It can be nice down in the glen, but it's a different world up in the summits. And if you're spending a night up there and the weather turns, once again, I've experienced this. I think I've got a video which I'll link to somewhere, with my brother and I had a horrendous wild camp. The tent got trashed. We didn't get any sleep. So I always check the weather and leave the weather check. I usually check it throughout the week, and I always check it the morning or as late as possible, because it can change. And there's numerous, depending on where you stay. This is obviously for Scotland. I use things like the Mountain Weather Information Service. Met Office is really good. I also actually find, this might cause some controversy, but I actually find the BBC Weather app pretty good. Their timings aren't as good, but it certainly shows, if you leave it as late as possible, it can sometimes show where the weather front is, and then if you know your weather, you can make plans from there. So that's it, number 4. And what else do I do? Number 5. Just if it's your first time or you've not been out that often wild camping, check your pack weight, food, water if you're having to take any. You've got your tent, you've got lots of extra kit which adds extra weight, and if you're not used to the extra weight, it might be worthwhile going out on a hike just to see what it feels like. And I always suggest poles. They're not cool, talked about it before, but poles will help in things like if you have to cross rivers or stability on even ground, because the backpack can make you a bit more unbalanced and what have you. 6, I always check where's the closest water supply to the summit. you don't want to be carrying all the water up because it adds so much weight. If you can find a summit with a burn pretty close by, that's ideal, or a tarn if you're in the Lake District, or a lock-in or what have you, that's perfect. But often the summits, because it's a summit, there's no water running down to it. So I always check where the closest water supply is. If it's a good distance away, I will stop at that point on the way up and fill all the bottles up, so the time carrying the water is minimised. Believe me, your knees will thank you for that. And finally, so that's tip 6. Tip 7, yeah, depending, one of the things I do, I often like to take photographs of the sunsets and the sunrises. So there's some useful apps out there. The ones I've written down here, something called SunCalc, and that'll tell you the position of where the sun's rising, the sun's setting. So if you're on a summit, you might be on a summit which gets great sunsets in March, but if you're there in mid-July, it might be the position of the sun coming up might not be ideal. And also check sunset and sunrise times, and there's loads of free apps telling you what time the sun's rising and the sun's setting. So that's just, yeah, that's it really. It's not too detailed, as I said. This isn't designed as this is what you should do. These are just my personal tips and answering the question there about what prep I do before I go. So hopefully you found that useful. If you're out and about, stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.